Before I get into things, I just want to address the bathrobe in the room. It's been a while since we've discussed the concept of the bathrobe, and when I don't know how old I was, my sister Crystal, who's the youngest in our family, she went through like a Princess Diaries phase. Anybody else know what I'm talking about? Okay, so this one character, like just partway through the movie, he's like the neighbor, who's like a writer, and he always shows up outside wearing his bathrobe. And anytime you kind of see a bathrobe in the movies or whatever, it's almost always to like signify that whoever's wearing it they just do not have their life together. And so for me, I wear a bathrobe sometimes when I feel like I need to just have a hug. And so my bathrobe's sort of like a hug, but it's also sort of like a symbol that like, I'm not feeling super great. And there's a massive temptation that I face. I think all of us probably can relate to this, but you want to kind of project a certain image. You want to make people to look at you, and some of us want people's eyes just to glaze right past. We don't want to get too much attention. Other people want attention. I'm probably more the second one. You have to laugh so fast at that. And for me at least, I wanting to get attention. I want to make sure I'm getting attention for the right reasons. And a bathrobe was not usually the right reason. And so that's one of the reasons that's the only reason I'm wearing this today, is because it's been a bathrobe kind of week. It's been a bathrobe kind of month. June is just generally a very, very busy month for a lot of us. My wife's birthday is June the 5th, and my birthday is June the 7th, and then my daughter's Piper, our firstborn, she's June the 8th. I'll never forget, we were sitting in a financial seminar on June the 7th, is my birthday, and Sarah was having contractions, and I still have the piece of paper where I'm like writing down the times and thinking, this is the last birthday that's ever going to be completely about me. The rest of them are going to be kind of about Piper's birthday tomorrow. I didn't know it was going to be tomorrow at the time, but, and then Piper also graduated from grade 8 this year, which just blows my mind. And then our anniversary is this 16 years, is this coming Friday? And this like school ending, it's like, it's a crush. It's a crush of things. None of them are bad things, but they're just a lot. And there's also some things that have happened this week for the Gordon family at large. Some things we've learned that have been very, fairly difficult for a lot of us. And that's been weighing very, very heavy on my heart. It's been made it very difficult to enjoy the great moments. And it's kind of like sapped some of the life out of those things. And also knowing I'm preaching today, and then by some wonderful miracle of scheduling, Sarah was on violin, which usually if those two things are happening the same day, we try to make that not happen because it's just a lot. We've got 5 kids. If we get to church on time, it's just the Lord he's good all the time. But, it's just, you know what I'm saying. But we both felt this morning, like, okay, or it's not this morning, earlier this week, like, okay, we're both scheduled, and we just both felt like God was saying, no, I want you both on it. And just to see Sarah up there playing today, I was saying, not many things bring me to tears, but those who know me well, no, that's not totally true. I'm also not really afraid of crying too much. So anyways, all that being said, it's been a bathrobe kind of week, and I was sharing with some of the other elders, is like, boy, I feel like this is going to be more of a raw day. And Ross's response was like, a raw Josh is Josh at his best. And I just felt like that was like such a beautiful thing for me to hear. And it just reminded me that like, that's what New Life Fellowship is to be. It's to be a place where we can feel totally safe. And the thing that I have to believe every time I put a bathrobe on, every time I get up in front of people, every time I step into something that makes me uncomfortable, is that it has to be an act of faith in the safety of the community. Because sometimes we go into things we don't feel safe. But that doesn't matter how we feel, because the reality is that I am safe everywhere I go. And so for me, wearing a bathrobe or whatever, it's a testament to the safety of our community. It's a testament to the trust I'm putting in the people around me. And I look at what New Life Fellowship has meant for me personally in the last 4+ years, and it's been a greenhouse. It's I can see my heart has just grown, and God has shown me his love in such beautiful, powerful, powerful ways. So this morning, I want to talk about my father. And so the sermon today is titled The Portrait of My Father, Learning to See God More Clearly. And a lot of you actually probably know my dad. It's the picture up there. That's Jim Gordon. You can all give a hand for Jim. So my dad's a pastor as well, and he's preaching today, and just to really mess his head, I invited him to come and hear me preach. And I've used this joke 2 times already, and it's gotten a great result, so we'll see how good you guys do. It was like, I said, now that Dad's not here, there's a whole bunch of extra things I can preach on. Okay. That's fine. Anyways. My dad, he's also a pastor. He's a pastor of the Lower Road Christian Fellowship. Actually, Lower Road is the church that really helped get New Life kind of rooted well here. So kind of the planting church for us. And he has obviously been in my life for a very, very long time, as far as I can remember. He's had a really big impact in my life. Some of the impact has not been like directly from him. It's sort of been like circumstantial. So we have a large family. So there's just to prove that it's. So my dad's in the middle there, and I'm the most good looking on my left. You're right. That's I got what kid is that on one of my kids is on my shoulders. Anyway, large family. There's 9 kids. So I'm the second oldest. I have an older sister, Elizabeth, and then there's my youngest sister, Crystal, at the bottom. There's 7 boys in the middle. So my dad was a pastor, and he took over a Lower Road Christian Fellowship, the senior pastor position after my grandfather, who's my mom's dad. And so I'm the oldest son, and so my whole life, people have been saying, "Oh, Josh, you're gonna be a pastor someday." And for a long time, that was great. But then I kind of went through a phase where I just did not want to be a pastor at all. I just pushed it against it and kicked against it. I ended up going to school in Calgary, the Bible college out there, and that's where I met my wife, Sarah. Our parents were elated to find out that both of us were from Ontario, so we moved back here in time to have Piper. But through my college years, I definitely felt like I was supposed to move in the pastoral direction. But I had some really brutal experiences within within school, and then also in some of the internships I had. I remember swearing to myself, in the appropriate way, that I'd never be a pastor. Like I'm never doing it. And it's a bathrobe kind of day. So I look at my life and I see that my father has had a massive impact. And that's the kind of thing with fathers, is they have a huge impact. It's hard to overstate the impact that a father can have on your life. Some good and some not. I think for most of us, it's a blend. I think ideally there's as much of a good impact as there is a negative. But for a lot of us, it's not that way. Some of us have a lot more of a difficult relationship with their father. When I think about my dad, and I think about my childhood, think about like what I've seen of him as I've grown older too, I just think he's such a godly man. Full of character, full of compassion, full of wisdom. And it's hard-earned, like very hard-earned wisdom. Just thinking about, the last 10 years of, I just turned 38, so okay, in the last while, the things I've seen of my dad leading a church through COVID, like that's been exceedingly difficult for Lower Road and for a lot of churches. There have been some like legal issues that have come up. There have been some scandals that have come up, none of which have touched Dad directly, but he's had to shepherd a church and a private school through that. I've just seen so much strength from my father. And when I think back to being a kid too, I just have all these like weird memories that pop up. I was trying to share some with my siblings, but a lot of the siblings were born after these memories took place. But I remember after dinner sometimes we'd like go under the table and like try to like trap my dad's feet with our hands. I know, it's riveting. It's a great game. And then he would like, move his feet around. You had to be there. I also remember him like, it's not gonna look impressive because I'm wearing a bathrobe, which is kind of the point, I guess. But like after dinner, sometimes he would like sit back and like put his hands on his head and he like bounce his biceps. And we'd have to guess what song he was bouncing it to. And that was, I don't know. It's actually a great thing. I do it for I should start doing it for my kids. They would just laugh now, that's the thing. He also had this game which blew my mind at the time, and it still does today, but when I think about it, like we would sometimes just open the Bible to the book of Psalms and just start reading one of the Psalms, and he would try and guess what Psalm it was. And he was right, probably 50-50, which blows my mind. But it also speaks to how much my dad loves the Lord and how much he's a student of the scriptures. And it's been very humbling for me to watch my dad as he's pastored and as he's led a church and led our family through some very, very challenging, difficult times. There's also been some very uncomfortable moments in my relationship with my dad. Most of them he wasn't around for. I was in a counseling office with a counselor who should not be named. It was Ross. And kind of coming to a few like realizations and seeing that, man, now that I'm growing up, I kind of disagree with some of my dad's parenting decisions. Like that was like a very odd, like the kind of environment that, like the church environment that I grew up in, like you did not question leadership ever. Like you respected God's authority all the time, which has kind of messed me up in some ways. But we're coming to a place where like, oh man, I think I disagree with how my dad parented me. Like, that just felt so, even saying it out loud now, difficult. There were definitely times where I've disagreed with my dad about his leadership decisions as a pastor. That's been very hard. But also looking at my own life and looking at some of the wounds that I carry and some of the difficult parts of myself that I don't really want to go. I don't want to go down some of those rabbit holes. And I can see that I look at him like, I feel like my dad might be kind of responsible for some of those things. And God's brought me to a place where he's teaching me something right now that has brought enormous freedom to me, both as a dad, but being a dad myself, but also in a relationship with my own father. And as I'm kind of coming to grips with what it looks like to be a son, now that I'm in like my mid-late 30s, and that's this. We all have a deep, deep need for a perfect father. We were born that way. My need for a perfect father began the day that I was conceived, which was 9 months to the day before June 7th. And I don't want to think about that anymore. Okay, so side note, this is not my notes at all. It's too late, I can't stop now. My mom and dad, they had a website called The Intimate Couple, they probably started it when I was like my mid-teens, and it was all about having a great sex life as a couple. Yeah, I know, I was 15, and imagine, anyways, I thought might be one of the things maybe I should talk to Ross about this after, now that I think about it. Anyway, I think there's a lot of new people here coming for the first time, like, oh boy, I'm sorry, and I'm not sorry. This is like a true glimpse of me and New Life Fellowship. I'm just being honest, just being myself. So, my need for a perfect father began the day that I was conceived. And my earthly father was never intended to be that for me. And that has brought me an enormous amount of freedom as a dad. Because I had this idea floating around my head where I have no idea where I picked it up, but the idea was like, I need to represent God to my child. Because if I don't, then my kids can get screwed up in how they think about God. And the insidious thing about that lie is that there's partial truth in there, in the sense that, there's something else I learned in the counseling office, is that the flesh offers me a choice from a very young age, probably for me, even before I was aware it was a choice. But it says, hey, the stuff that's going on in your family life, the stuff that's going on with your mom, with your dad, those actually are reflective of your relationship with God. And so, Josh, here's some things that are true about you, based on how you perceive your dad's treating you, based on how you perceive your family environment is. And the flesh offers me all these lies, and I just kind of accept them. And they just become part of how I see the world, become part of how I see God, or how I see men or women, or it just infects everything. And when I saw for the first time that my concept of God had been colored and influenced and impacted by how my earthly father related to me, by how the authority figures in my life at an early age related to me, by what my family environment was like, all those things together kind of had an impact on my concept of God. Well, right away, I felt God kind of rush in and say, hey, let me introduce you to me. Let me introduce myself to you again, for the first time, and let me introduce you to me on my own terms. And I think that's actually an invitation that he extends to all of us. So, we have these ideas about who God is and what he's like, and they've kind of been colored, for good or for not, by, what our childhood was like, that type of thing. And God's been sort of introducing himself to me for quite a long time. And there's a handful of lies that have been part of how I operate for a very long time. And I want to kind of move through a handful of these, and we'll start kind of looking at some specific scriptures, and then I have some things that God said to me that I've put together in slides, so they'll be showing up behind me. And before we do that, technically I should have prayed. I definitely should have. You guys are all with me on this. I should have prayed at the very beginning, but I'm gonna pray right now because I think I need it. I think all of us need it. But Father, that is the right thing to call you because you are my Father. You're my perfect Father. And thank you for the beautiful truth that you want to meet me and introduce yourself to me and earn my trust, which blows my mind. And you want to do that on your terms and directly to me and directly to each one of us. Thank you for the beautiful truth. And I ask, Father, that your Spirit make yourself really obvious to me. I'm not super sensitive all the time. So help me to hear the things that you want me to say. Help me to hold back in the things that I shouldn't say. I want this to be something where you're the sculptor of this message that I have to share, that we have to share together. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you for the safety that you are for me. Amen. All right, well, the first verse I want to hit on here is in Matthew 14, chapters 25 to 33. Oh, never mind. Back up, guys. Notes are in the wrong order. Okay. Ephesians 2, 8 to 10. Oh, yes. Well, you know what's a great chapter? For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing, it is a gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one can boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand, that we should walk in them. If you've ever heard these psalms, it says Selah or Selah, so like a musical interlude? That's basically what that was right there. Perfect. Fred, this is now the Josh and Fred show. Or it's the Jesus show. Okay, I should pray again. That's what I should do. All right. Oh, man. This verse has been something that's very important for all of us. It's been very, very important to me. And there's been a few things that God has spoken to me and he's highlighted to me through this specific passage. So the first thing is he says, we've been saved through faith, and this is not our own doing. It's a gift of God. That's always stood out to me in a huge way. The second thing that stood out to me is this in verse 10, we are his workmanship. Created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand for us to walk in them. One of the things that I just internalized, one of the lies that I believed is that I am responsible for my own personal development and my own personal growth. And that if I just sit and do nothing, then I'm actually gonna atrophy. I'm going to wither away. I'm not going to, and that if I don't actively push myself forward and try to make myself better, that I'm actually becoming worse. It's almost like God is moving at a pace, and if I don't keep up with him, that I'm actually going to fall behind. And I don't know where that lie came from, but there's a few really important truths that God has been speaking to me about this. He's kind of been the lie that I'm responsible for my performance, my development. I'm also responsible for my own screw-ups, and my past failures are a limitation on what God can do for me and through me today. Something that has caused me enormous guilt and enormous shame through the years, knowing that the ways that I've screwed up are now a cramp on what God can do. You know, it's like there's an asterisk beside my name. It's like, there's Josh Gordon, could have been so great, but because of this thing and that thing and the other thing. And we've actually listed all as a very, very long list of things that I'm very ashamed of. And some of you might be thinking like, well, I doubt the things he's done are as bad as the things I've done. And that might be true. It might not be true. But one of the other lies the flesh has is it says the things that you've done disqualify you, right? It's like you carry scar tissue in your life, and because of that scar tissue, there's certain things you can never have or never do. And one of the major things that God has been speaking to me, he says, Josh, you are not too scarred. We can go to the first slide, or not the first, whatever, the next slide, there we go. You are not too scarred. I delight in you. Josh, not only am I capable of fixing the sort of wrong that you are afraid you are, but I'm also willing to do so. And you're farther forward in your progress than you think you are. One of the reasons I just love this picture is I think it's ancient Chinese culture that they would take broken jars or pots or whatever, and that had cracked, and they'd repair it with gold. And so all the cracks are highlighted. And you actually take what was broken, you actually elevate the value of the thing through the repair of it. And knowing that God can take the things that I've screwed up, the relationships with my kids, the things that I've said to my kids, like I just think even this past weekend, we're in this weekend, the past few days, carrying some very heavy burdens. And I can't remember what the situation was, but it was our second oldest, Vienna. She said something, or she was trying to figure something out. I snapped at her so fast. And I didn't cut her down or anything like that. But at the same time, it was I want my kids to have an environment where they can be free to come to me and say what they're thinking and know that I want to hear it. But in that moment, I didn't want to hear it, and it was very clear to her, and it shut her down just like that. I could see it on her face, kind of like a shock. Oh, man. So going back and apologizing for that, that's actually something I learned from my dad. The number of times I can think back to being a kid, and my dad would come down and kneel in front of me and say, Josh, I said this thing to you before, man, and I'm so sorry. I should not have said that. Will you forgive me? That was not an uncommon thing in my family. I learned that from my dad. My dad taught me that. But it's still a friggin' hate having to do that to my kid. So there's that humbling myself aspect, but also knowing what I've done to her. Man, that sucks. But also God promises that she's not too scarred. And he says that he's going to work all things together for good. And so that's a great safety net that I rely on, that as I'm doing the best I know how as a dad, the inevitable damage that my kids are going to take, not just from me, but from the world around me, he's promising that he's going to be there to resolve that with her on his terms. And that's going to be something that he's going to interact. It's going to be a bridge between Vienna and between him. And he's going to show and relate himself to her in a very special way. Well, that's the gold in the cracks. Another big thing, another big truth that God's been teaching to me through this idea is that, I am his workmanship. He's responsible for me. He's responsible for my development. He's responsible for what I become. He's responsible. I just need to show up and trust that he's going to be enough for me in this moment standing in front of people, or he's enough for me alone waiting for the service to start. Even though I've got like kids hanging off me, I'm like sitting there like, I know, okay, I'm counting down in my head, there's minutes until I'm gonna get up there, and I'm kind of freaking out inside, but he promises he's gonna be enough for me in that very moment, that I don't have to try to impress people. And that's the next slide. Another thing God said to me, it's like, don't attempt to impress. Don't attempt to impress. In the very bottom corner, just down there, kind of in the faded blue, be simply you, right? Jesus is enough for me, and Jesus in me is gonna be enough for people around me. That's just true. And I can just sit and I just kind of marinate in that truth, is that I don't have to try to impress. Like the amount of freedom that brings, like just think for a second, like think for my life going through how many interactions that I have with people, or that I don't have, like that I imagine I might have with people. I'm like, okay, how am I gonna like make sure I don't come across the wrong way? Like I've been I've been sensitive about my weight for a long time. It's something I've struggled with. Like body image stuff has always been a struggle for me. And one of the things that I just think about is like, what do I look like from like the back and 3/4 version? Like, do I look cool? Like, I hope I look cool. And it's like, there's all these like, it's like silly. It's like kind of embarrassing to admit it, but it's like, is my hat on the right angle? Like, do I have to like, is it straight, like all the stupid things, like, and it's all of it is, I want to be impressive. I want to look like somebody that is cool. And I want to be somebody that's worth looking up to, for my kids, for whoever. It's like, that's a constant, I want to be respected. That's what it is, I think. I want to be respected. I want to be valued. And so I need to project a certain image. And what God's saying is like, that desire, the desire to be valued, is not a bad desire. It's a good desire. But the flesh says, here are a list of things, Josh, that you can do. Here's a way you can present yourself to make sure that you can get that need met by people around you. But it's like, okay, you are now worthy of respect. And Jesus is like, no, Josh, that's sinful. Just be yourself. Don't attempt to impress. Be simply you. And that's something my father, in fact, my earthly father tells me this too. It's like, that's something my heavenly Father says, you do not need to impress anybody. You just look to me, just be simply you. The next huge lie that's Ephesians 2:8-10 has really been dismantling for me, is a lie that I need to be better. You know, I'm falling behind. You know, I'm a poor steward of my potential. I need to be better. I'm letting people down. I'm letting God down because I could be so good. That was something I heard a lot as a kid. It's like, oh, Josh has so much potential. That's like every report card. I could like track every class in high school, and I sort of had it down by the time I was in grade 12. I managed to cultivate I feel like I did, and maybe I didn't. Maybe people saw it right through me, probably. See, this goes through my head, and you're just seeing it. I would like the first like 2.5, 3 weeks of class, I would make sure I would engage the teacher, like raise my hand to answer questions, always do homework. And I could like put up that effort for like 3-4 weeks, no problem. But then I would get so bored, and not like school was I was too advanced for school, not like that at all. It was like I just didn't want to do homework anymore. But I'd managed to create this perception. People are like, oh, well, Josh is a keener, he's super smart, because I would engage. I did the things that all the smart people would do. But then my true colors would show, and I'd just kind of start slacking off, I wouldn't do my homework. But I managed to sort of like ride the coattails of that reputation for the first 3 to 4 weeks of class through the whole year. And so teachers would write consistently, like, Josh has so much potential. If only he would apply himself more. Why are you laughing, Richard? Just because your kid was dedicated doesn't mean I'm not. We'll talk after. I love you, buddy. Yeah. Classic Josh, vintage Josh. If only he'd apply himself more, like over and over and over again. That's what I heard. And it seeps in, man. It seeps in. And this idea that I'm falling behind. But that's not true. It's not true. That's what this next slide is about. Something God's been speaking to me very, very clearly. It says, Josh, you are on step X of your journey, and everything is going according to my plan. Small text here, guys. I prepared all of this in advance for you, and all that is required of you is to stick close. All I have to do is stick close to Jesus. That's what the word abiding means. We're called to abide. It's that every moment close with Jesus. If he's my mentor, he's the one who's responsible for helping me develop, helping me grow, helping me to you reach the next level. Whatever phraseology maybe sticks out in your mind from your childhood, he's responsible for that. And all I have to do is just live with him in every moment. And as things come up, it's all right, Jesus, what are we doing with this? How do you want me to handle this? What happens is over time, our hearts soften. Our sensitivity to other people increases. Our willingness to be patient with people increases. And we start to develop and show the fruits of the Spirit because they're fruits. It's not I can't think of any other word other than fruit right now. I'm trying to think of a word that means something that you build with your own hands. Just birdhouse. It's not like the birdhouse, the Spirit, where you got to measure and cut and build and all that. It's a fruit. It comes naturally as you're plugged into the vine. As you're plugged into Jesus, you're abiding day by day by day, moment by moment, minute by minute with Jesus, right? One thing I like to tell my kids, just because I tell myself, is Jesus is enough for me right now. He's not enough for me tomorrow. He's enough for me right now. But also he's waiting for me in tomorrow. So it's as I'm moving forward, he's there. All I have to do is stick close. I'm on step X of my journey. Everything is going according to his plan. And that brings me enormous, enormous peace. The next truth is a response to is Jesus dismantling this, I think it's a very fundamental struggle that I have, which is a response to pressure. And, there's the fight or flight response people get. I think there's a third one, just freeze. Because I get depending on the situation, but I freeze a lot of the time. Whatever. If you guys can't read it, I'm sorry. I actually will give these graphics to anybody who wants them. Just come up to me and talk after, and I'll get your email address. But it says, Josh, I'm not asking you to succeed. I'm asking you to simply show up. The outcome is not your responsibility. Fear is an option, for sure, but it's not necessary. And I don't know what it is about the idea that fear is an option for me. That just takes the power away. It's okay, I'm allowed to be afraid if I want to, but I can also choose just to show up, knowing that he is responsible for the outcome. And I'm responsible to trust him in each moment and to follow where he leads me. The next verse that God's passage is Matthew 14:25-33. You're probably really surprised to hear me say that. This is the story of Peter stepping over the side of the boat. When Jesus comes into the storm, all the disciples are freaking out. They think it's some supernatural, paranormal entity. They think it's a ghost or something like that. And Jesus says, no, it's me. It says, Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came towards Jesus. This is picking up at the partway through verse 29. So Peter says to Jesus, hey, if that's you, then call me out. Tell me to come. For me, it's that's the dumbest thing to say to a ghost. It's if you're who I think you are, do this. Anyways, Jesus says, yeah, come on out. So Peter gets over the side and he walks on the water to come towards Jesus. But then Peter, seeing the wind, becomes frightened and begins to sink. And he cries out, Lord, save me. Jesus stretched out his hand, took hold and said, you of little faith, why did you doubt? I wonder how long that walk back to the boat felt for Peter. It's Jesus lifts you up and okay, now I'm walking on the water again, back over the side of the boat. It's just a weird thing to think about. But I can really relate because I've got that flight or fight or fear or freeze. That's all influenced by fear. And it's so easy to me get distracted or to for the wind or the waves. And so you can actually pop the next slide up. What Jesus is saying to me is he's saying, Josh, keep your eyes on me. Don't look at the wild storm of the shrinking bank account or the threatening waves of scary what-ifs or the harsh winds of rejection and doubt. As the flesh drops ideas into your very fertile imagination, hold tight to my word. And this last 2 days have been this for me, so much. I have carried a heavy weight in my soul, in my heart, because of what's been going on in our extended family. It's been very difficult and very heavy, mixed with weird sense of disappointment in myself that Sarah's birthday wasn't special enough, or looking ahead to this week, say, oh man, I wish we could do this and that and the other thing for our anniversary, or man, I hope Piper felt like the graduation and things we did were enough for her. The flesh doesn't give me a friggin' second to just relax. The flesh doesn't do that ever. It's always there just nattering away. And I get distracted. And then I start to feel just this heaviness, this weight. And yesterday, I just felt so tired and so worn down. And the thought of preaching was oh man. And then I started looking through this artwork and looking at these messages, and it felt like God was just calming my spirit. He's every one of these things for me is just something hey, he's it's the gentle, warm hand on my chin, kind of pulling my head up and redirecting my gaze back into his face. Because what the flesh wants to do, the enemy has one tactic. It does one thing it does, which is it lies. And the outcome, he's got one thing he's looking for. He wants me to look anywhere but in Jesus' eyes. Anywhere else. Where it's looking at the terrible things that might come, and the fear. Maybe he wants me to look into the future, right? With anxiety and thinking about the scary things that might happen. Maybe he wants me to look into the past with regret, right? Looking at the ways I've screwed up, the way that my scar tissue. But Jesus is saying, no, keep your eyes on me right now. Keep your eyes on me. That's what he's saying to me over and over again. And what I'm starting to experience more and more is as I choose to focus on what he has for me, then the things of this earth, things of this world grow strangely dim. There's that old chorus that maybe some of us remember. The things of the earth grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and the light of his grace. And Jesus is much bigger and much more powerful than anything we can go through. But I freeze up and I don't want to see anything. So I close, it kind of leads perfectly to the next slide. It's like Jesus is saying, Josh, I want to show you beauty. I want to show you beauty in the midst of what you're going through, but your eyes are squeezed shut. It's I'm just too afraid to look around. I'm too afraid because I want to ignore the impending bills. I want to ignore, the fact that clients haven't been responding. I want to ignore this or that or the other thing. And so I just try to shove everything away. So I close my eyes tight. Maybe I do it physically. Maybe I do it by Rocket League. I love to play Rocket League. I'm at the all-star level now. And it's video games, maybe some Netflix or Amazon Prime. I'm counting down the days for the next season of Jack Ryan, June 30th. That's gonna be great because, right? Or I'll just go and let's sit by myself somewhere, away from the kids or away from Sarah. And it's not I want to be away from the kids or away from Sarah, but it's I just sit in my own space. My eyes are shut. But what God is saying to me is this. He says, would you mind looking into my face? Because I want to show you incredible things. Tiny pictures that whisper in a subtle voice to your heart. Over the next little while, Josh, you'll be zooming out, gaining new, clear perspective on today. It is very beautiful, and it will be worth it. And the most important line, I bet my life on it. God bet on me. He risked on me. And I don't think too much of the theology of that statement, because I don't think for me it's not intended to be a doctrinal foundation, but just the idea that it's hey, listen, I did all of this so you have a chance to experience beauty in the midst of the storm, in the midst of the terror, in the midst of the fill in the blank for yourself. And then the next slide as well. He says, Josh, I've got you. You are at your best when you're following me. Even when you're not convinced you're hearing me right, if you move in the direction you suspect I'm leading, I honor that. After all, how much faith you have doesn't matter. Who you put your faith in is most important. I am eager to be enough for you. I always, as a kid, remember this, always hearing about, missionaries or moving, overseas. And I've actually got a friend from college. Him and his wife actually attended our church last week. And they're moving to Europe. to like one of the least churched countries in all of Europe. And they're working to kind of set up a Christian community. And I'm like, that is faith right there. Like the young version of me would have like, that is faith, 100%. Or so someone's like, you know what? I knew that God was leading me to do this. I knew that it was going to mean I was going to lose my friends or lose this, but I knew God was calling me, so I went there. It's like, I almost felt like faith was related to how much you were going to lose, I think. I'm just kind of like thinking about actually, I'm a verbal processor, so I'm actually thinking about that right now. It's like, I think it was tied to how much I was going to lose and how convicted I was that this was where God was leading me. But the reality is sometimes I just don't know. Like I think God's leading me there, but it's like, God, give me a sign, like help me to know. But he doesn't always do that. And part of it is because he wants to teach us to hear his voice. And so as we as we kind of like fall, it's like, I think God's telling me to lead here. I kind of want to go that direction, but I don't really know. And it's like, take that step. Like even if you suspect it's God leading you, if that's the reason you're going to go there, that's faith, man. Absolutely. And what happens is like God's waiting there for you, even if it wasn't like the right way. The reality is that faith is not determined by the outcome. Faith is determined by the reason why we do the thing, right? And if I'm doing it because I believe, and I suspect this is where God's leading me, well, that's counted to me as righteousness, right? And so, and the other thing is that sometimes it's like, okay, Josh, so you just did that, you stepped forward, and it worked out amazingly well, or maybe it didn't work out well, but still I have this sense of satisfaction and peace and fulfillment inside that God said, yeah, that was the thing I wanted. So now, Josh, think back to what you were feeling and like just the quality of the experience before you made the step. And like now you know the next time you experience something like that, that's actually me leading. And so as we like take a tentative step forward, it's like, I think God's leading me here, and like, I think he's leading me here. Well, as we pay attention to what that sensation is like, it's like, okay, no, that's how we learn to hear his voice more and more clearly over time. The last passage I want to hit on is in Hebrews 4, verse 15. It's actually, I'm going to read starting in verse 14, but therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses. We do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses. We have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Verse 16, let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. This next slide has been extremely powerful in my life, this truth that Jesus has been speaking to me. Jesus is saying, there's nothing in your anxiety attack, in your overwhelm, in the adrenaline dump that's bigger than who I am or what I am capable of that. More than that, no experience you go through is foreign to me, he says. I am breathing with you. I'm feeling your pulse race. I know the nausea surging through the pit of your stomach. I know the tight knot that obstructs the deep breaths you attempt to take, and I'm not afraid of it. Perfect peace begins with looking past the anxiety into my eyes. There's just something so visceral and powerful and compelling about that to me. I didn't really understand my struggle with anxiety. I didn't know that I had anxiety until the last year and a half where I was diagnosed with ADHD, and part of that psychiatrist told me was like, sometimes you have anxiety too. And I was like, oh, what's that like? And he kind of described it. I was like, oh, yeah, I have that. And I look back on experiences I had as a kid where it's like my extremities just go numb. I just feel like everything's just like crushing down on me. And I can't breathe, like kind of pass right here. And it's like, that was an anxiety attack. I had those as a kid. I just never had any way I didn't have words for it. And nobody talked about it. And so like, as a kid, you just kind of assume everyone, it's like I got glasses when I was 8. I just thought the whole world was just like fuzzy things moving around without any edges to them, And it was like, you just sort of assume that this is the way things are, but for everyone. And when I started to realize that Jesus knows what that experience is like the worst that we can experience, betrayal, abuse, The worst things that we can experience, Jesus knows. He knows what it's like. He can empathize with us. We're not alone in the midst of the fire. He is there with us, and he promises to be enough for us in that situation. He doesn't ever promises that we're not going to go through it. No, he says the perfect peace begins as we look into his eyes. I think it's in Isaiah, it says he will keep those in perfect peace whose minds are set on him. And like that is such a powerful thing. It's like, how do I keep my mind set on Christ? The reality is like, it's in moments like this, where there's the fire and the smoke, and it's like, Jesus knows what this is like. Jesus knows what this is like. He's like, hold on to that truth. And it's turned my life around in so much. Like, it hasn't made things any easier circumstances wise, but it's made the experience of going through anxiety and the experience of going through stress more manageable, because God shows up for me there, because I look in his face, I look in his eyes. The last two slides I have are sort of more like a response. And the next one, the slide is just a snippet of poetry that kind of bubbled up in my heart. It says, Father, be my wisdom when the choices all seem wrong, and be my vision when the darkness stretches long. And will you walk beside me when I don't see what to do? My only shot at getting what I need is trusting you. And that's a prayer that we can all make to our perfect Father. The last slide is one that's very meaningful to me as well. I love this picture. It's such a cool picture of like the bottom of a canyon, just looking up, and I just see the sky. And I went through a period of depression maybe 4 or 5 months ago. It's like a more sustained experience with depression than I've had in a very long time, and just felt like everything was gray. Everything was beige, just the flat, most boring of the colors. Everything felt flat. It felt like there was no taste in my life. It just felt like I just didn't want to do anything. And I have this playlist of worship songs that just really seem to like touch something in my heart that I've got. And even those didn't seem to work very well. And God started to bring back all these old hymns. When I was grade like 5 or 6, my dad was my teacher for a couple of years. We can't tell if those were really good years or really bad years. A bit of both. And one of the things, I went to a small Christian school. It was like maybe like 40 kids away from technically being homeschooled. It was a very small school. And one of the things we had to do was like memorize hymns. So every day we'd write a hymn out. And so there's some of those old hymns that I kind of forgotten about, but it was like, when peace like a river attends my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. And this image, I look at it, and it's like the canyon walls represent just the towering problems that seem immovable. And there's a point in your life where there's not really any usefulness to trying to solve the situation, because you just got to move through it. And it's like, I have to look past that and look up at the sky and say, regardless of what's going on around me, even if the worst thing happens, it's okay. It's well with my soul, because God is good. And sometimes I don't really feel that. And the flesh would say, because you don't feel it, you probably don't believe it. But it's like, no, I'm choosing to make this true for myself right now. It is well with my soul. Whatever the things that are, the waves that are coming at me, like I feel like I'm just an inch above the water. The next big wave is probably going to take me down. It's like, it is well with my soul. It's like just something about the idea of like looking past, looking above, and seeing like the truth and the reality of who God is. He's my perfect Father. My struggles, my failure, my bitterness, my cynicism, my hatred, my fill in the blank, none of it is too bad or too big or too heavy for him. He's the only one that can handle me at my absolute worst. He's the only one. And that's what faith is. Because at the end of the day, if we can't trust God with that, Can we actually trust him? That's kind of a scary thought to say out loud. Like, I believe he is. I believe he is worthy of that trust. And one of the things that he's shown me is that he wants to earn my trust. And that feels like part of me hates saying that, because God shouldn't have to earn my trust. Like, he died on the cross. He did all these great big things. But the reality is, at least for me, is that I have that very fleshly idea of like, what have you done for me lately? Right? And it's like, somehow in my head, there's like this disconnect. And maybe it's because I'm such an emotional feelings person. It's like there's a disconnect sometimes. Was like, okay, I understand theologically and intellectually what Jesus dying on the cross meant. But as far as I'm just stressed out past what I thought my max is, and the kids are being crazy and the boys won't stop talking about poo, and they probably get that from their mother, let's be honest. That's not true. They get it from me, absolutely, not a question about it. It's like in that moment, it's like, this feels so wrong to say, but I'm exposing the flesh's lies in my own head. It's like, what does the cross mean in that moment? Like, what does Jesus mean for me in this very moment? And the reality is, like, in that moment where everything is terrible and there's nothing good, it's like, that is me just seeing the waves and sinking below the surface. And what do? It's like, Lord, save me. That's all I can say sometimes. And he doesn't promise to fix the circumstances, but he promises to be peace to me. He promises to be my peace. He promises to me to be joy, even though my circumstances are screaming that I should be discouraged and lost. He promises to be my direction. He promises to be my wisdom, all the things that I deeply crave. He promises to answer my deepest questions, even in the midst of just the darkest, slipperiest, greasiest night. And that's the portrait of my Father that's been emerging. That's who he's been showing himself to me to be and proving himself to me to be. But he needed my permission to do that. It's because as long as I chose to keep up the facade that I erected between me and him, as long as I chose to keep that up there, then he is at arm's length and he can't really get in. But the moment I say yes, introduce me, like, show me who you are. Like, man, he takes that very seriously. He always answered that prayer with like tears in his eyes, like a yes, I can't wait to be enough for you. I can't wait to show you how I can be enough for you. And that's the invitation he has for all of us. And so if this is something that maybe you've never made that decision before, you've always sort of like held God at arm's length, well, this is a great day. It's a great day to say, God, will you introduce yourself to me? Will you show me what you're really like? Will you help to break down the lies and the accumulated sort of detritus and garbage of my past that's like sort of clouding my vision of who you are? I promise you, he will say yes. I'm going to close with prayer. But I also know if there's something that you want to talk through, someone to get off your chest, I'm so happy to hear what you have to say. We've got Pastor Ross at the back and Pastor Greg over there as well. More than happy to just be a listening ear, pray for you, whatever you need. But Father, you are a good Father. You respect me, which blows my mind. And you're willing to engage with me at my level. And you're willing to answer the questions that just feel so dumb. Like I just feel silly for even having the question. But it's not too small for you. And there's no accusation I can make that's too big for you. But nothing can scare you away. And you're in this with me for the long haul. Thank you for that. Thank you for being the perfect Father. I love doing life with you. Thank you, Jesus. Amen.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that message and it blessed you as we discover more about this great life we have in Jesus. want to encourage you to like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And also you can check out these videos here and watch more sermons and more messages. It really will encourage you in the joy and the power we have in Jesus Christ.